I can tell you that story.
All right.
It's not really a cool story or anything. It's just I love that plate though.
No, it's a good plate.
Because it's just everybody, like, at least in Salem, everybody wants to hire these guys,
This isn't from Salem.
No, it's not. That's the thing, is if the car, or even if it had spent its life in Salem, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just different. I like different. I don't like being the same dude, you know, over and over.
No. I grew up with an American car dad who ran a shop. He worked in the auto parts business and then ran a part-time shop at the house where I grew up wrenching on mostly old Ford trucks. And then when I was like 15, I moved in with a friend and they had a broken down Ford truck and a couple other broken down cars. And they said I could sleep on the couch if I did an engine swap in this Ford truck. So I knocked it out. And then the very last car was a Volkswagen Rabbit. And it was actually just like a mile down the road from here. And it all started in this same complex that my shop's in now. I would walk down here and get Volkswagen parts and then became friends with the Volkswagen owner, the shop owner, Dr. VW. L5 also started here. They were gone by the time I started coming here. But Dr. VW had a shop here. Nate from Wagenswest had a shop here who I had not met quite yet. I got the Volkswagen Rabbit running. I brought it down here to show the Volkswagen shop owner, Dave. And by that time we had become friends and I had no more cars to work on and he knew I was gonna need to find a job so I could pay rent. He offered me a job working on Volkswagens, wrenching on Volkswagens, and I did that for probably like 3 months. And Dave took me out to lunch one day and we drove by L5's new shop. At this point they were on State Street in Salem. And we drove by there coming back from lunch and I saw a Volkswagen, a split window bus sitting outside of L5. Growing up, I had to have seen them, but I never remembered them because I just wasn't into them. My dad had me into American cars. But I saw a split window bus and I saw the big emblem on the front, so I knew it was a Volkswagen. And I looked at Dave and I said, "What is that?" And he kind of laughed at me and said, "It's an early bus." And so I asked him if he had any for sale. He had two. And I bought one of them on the way home from lunch that day. And it was cheap. It was a 65 camper, I think a Californian camper, panel conversion, you know? But it had all its interior, but it was a rough bus, man. But I wanted a bus and I was determined to get this thing. And so I bought it for $500 from Dave, which was like going rate back then, you know what I mean? And then I lived in it outside of Dr. VW for like 3 months. I finally got kicked out of the house, and so I lived in the bus for like 3 months until I could save up enough money to get an apartment. By this time, I'm like 16. I met Nate Curtis because suddenly Nate came over to Dr. VW to get parts, and he had a split window bus. So he was the only guy I knew at that time because I was so fresh into Volkswagens that was into Volkswagen buses. So I like latched onto him. So yeah, that was where it all began, right here, where we're at now. And I was looking, it was funny because I knew this day we were gonna talk about this today, and I was looking through old pictures, and these are old pictures taken with disposable cameras, right? So I'm looking through hard copies, and I'm looking at these pictures, and there's pictures of like my old single cab with like 3 different buses chopped up into pieces in the back of it going to the scrapyard, right? We were just, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we would buy them all over the place for dirt cheap, sometimes free, and we'd part them out and there was nowhere to put them, so we cut them up into pieces and took them to the scrapyard and just parted out the best we could. Or sometimes I would get buses that would just be projects that never got finished and they'd go off to somebody else. I came across some pictures last night of the old tube frame. I body dropped a bus 9 inches and tube framed it, and I came across old pictures of that. So there's a lot of pictures a lot of buses that didn't necessarily ever become drivers, because I always had these wild ideas, and I would sacrifice a bus to try to get these ideas done, right? I mean, I think as far as like airbagging and body dropping a bus, because I grew up around also, a lot of my friends were like mini truckers, but I was a Volkswagen guy. So I would go to these I lived on Silverton Road across the street from the fairgrounds, and I ran a shop out of there for a long time. And it had a big driveway. I could fit lots of Volkswagens in there. And it really kind of helped, it helped business because I was on a major drag, right? Yeah. And so everybody knew where I was at, and it really helped a lot of business because people would drive by and see all these Volkswagens and just assume that I worked on them, which I was. And so back then I was doing a lot of service and maintenance, and because these cars were on the road back then, a lot of them. I mean, I had no problems maintaining all these cars. But I had all these friends that were mini truckers, and I really wanted, and I'd go to the mini truck shows. I love cars that are slammed, obviously. So I really like had this idea of getting a bus to lay rocker. And nobody that I know had really done it. The internet was just really coming out. This is 2001 era, you know? Probably like 3 different buses got sacrificed until I actually got one to like work. You know what I mean? Because it was a lot of work and a lot of money. I was a pretty broke kid. I would work on these cars. I would work a full-time job, work on these cars, and any money I made working on these cars went into my car. So that's all it was. I didn't work on these cars as it was just to supply my own addiction to building Volkswagens. Because I really like building them more than anything. And, but yeah, so a lot of those buses got sacrificed until we finally got one that I liked, or even got it. I actually did drive the bus, but it had no floors in it, no nothing. And I ended up driving it to the show at the fairgrounds that they used to do called Drop Zone, which is a mini truck show. People would come from all over the country to the show. It was huge. And so I drove it in there, and it actually showed there. I have pictures of it at the show, and it broke down at the show though. But like my house is across the street, so I just walk over, grab tools. We ended up getting it back home. I had a little tow bar I had rigged up, welded to the front bumper, so we ended up towing it back home. And then sometimes a lot of the times really what it was about was they started becoming worth money, right? In the early 2000s, like maybe 2005-ish or so, the euro was really high. So and the Samba came out, right? We had the Samba and the internet, and then we had the mismatch of the euro and the dollar. The euro was up here, the dollar's down here. So it only made sense to take these buses and sell them to Europe. So that's what we did. We would take buses. Nate and I, when I say we, it was mostly Nate and I, because we both kind of were like always a team. Even if we weren't working together, we were always a team. We were good friends. And so both of us we'd build these buses. We'd maybe have them ready by Woodburn was always the goal, because it's our local show, the Woodburn show. And then drive it to Woodburn, maybe tootle it around throughout the summer, and then it's up on the Samba for sale. And we did that over and over and over. And that's what we kind of did. Like, I mean, even in the early days of Wagenswest, the winter times would get slow. We'd put a bus together and throw it on the Samba and sell it. And that's what we would do to supplement income, like every winter. And I would basically do that to supplement income. So a lot of my drivers, I mean, I've had this old girl longer than I've owned any bus. And I've owned it for 4 years now, and I've driven it for 3 of those years. And that's the longest I've ever owned a Volkswagen bus. I had a single cab that I drove around for like 2 years, pretty solid, but they usually don't hang around but 6 months to a year. And then it's just on to the next one. But as we all know, that time's over. We did the pumpkin. Nate and I built the pumpkin, and it was between it and the drug smuggler. Those were kind of built at the same time that KCW did. They were really the first static buses on 17s that were a half inch off the ground, and you know. So I've always and then we have the Hobo high roof, right? It was arguably the very first high roof that was slammed. It went to UK, and a guy, James, owned it and he just made it way cooler than I even did. But it was a 68 high roof, real similar to your yellow one, but just slammed. So I've only owned 2 bay windows in my life. Both of them were runner drivers. I had the Hobo high roof, and then I had a 68 Savannah beige bus that it was my daily driver at the time. Got it from Nate, if I remember correctly. We slammed it and all that good stuff. Just made it a good driver, not slam, but it was my daily. And my daughter was outside washing it one day. She was little, like in her bathing suit. We were out there playing in the sprinklers and she was washing the bus. And my wife at the time had taken a picture of her washing the bus. And Jones Soda was doing a contest they said, send us a picture that represents summer for you. And of all the pictures, we'll pick one and we'll use it on one of our labels on Jones Soda. So my wife sent in this picture and they responded immediately and said, this contest is over, we're using your picture. Yeah, it was like, what? Okay. And we had to, sign the rights for him to use the picture and blah, blah, blah. And it was pretty cool. They sent us a whole case of Jones Soda with some extra labels and like just a little, like some swag, like a couple t-shirts and stuff like that. And they put it on their Jones Soda bottle. It was on the root beer. I found 2 of them in stores, but that's all I really ever found. I know a lot of other people found them because the next thing you know, you would start seeing them on Facebook and stuff like that, because people were like, hey, look what I found, it's a Volkswagen bus. And it's like, oh, hey, that's my daughter. So the Hobo high roof, actually, that is kind of a fun story because I was going to say it might be boring. The Hobo high roof, I was at Gary. So back then I would go to the Emory campouts out in Amity. They would have a campout every year. And I became really good friends with Gary because Gary and I have a lot of the same styles. We just really like to modify cars. And we like to slam things or raise things, whatever the case may be, but a lowered high roof. And I was like, wow, like who would have thought to lower a high roof, right? Like, but Gary did. And I was like, this is cool. So I wanted one. I thought it was rad, but I'm gonna really lower it, right? So the search is on for a high roof. A week later, Craigslist, there's a green high roof up in Portland. And later on, years later, I got pictures sent to me of it at the Woodburn show when it was actually a locals bus. I don't know who though. I called Nate. I was working for Nate at the time. And I called Nate and said, hey, I found a high roof. He knew I was looking for one because I told him what I wanted to do. And whenever I got wild ideas to do to buses, Nate was always the guy supporting it, making sure it happened too. So we hook up the truck and trailer, Nate's truck and trailer. We go up there and we pick it up. And immediately it's let's build suspension for this thing. Let's get this thing on the road. I can't remember, it had issues with the motor, so I swapped out the motor. We slammed it, tubbed it out in the front, slammed it on stock 14-inch bus wheels as low as I could possibly get it. I mean, it was low. And I wanted to like surprise Gary and show him my high roof, right? Because Gary's always like Gary's a dude that you need to interview. But he's always been like this mentor and I've always looked up to him and I wanted to show him this bus. So I don't think he really knew about it and his campout was like right around the corner. So I took it there. I showed up and I was like a young kid too. And I had a keg of beer in it. There was some random hole in the bus that I put the tap out of. And so all the buddies were all just, drinking beer, and the whole build of that bus was really just to take it to Gary's campout. That's what I built it for. I wanted to go and take it and show Gary my car that I built, right? And so I put it on the Samba for sale, and it went to the guy, James Soden, out in the UK. And he went crazy on it. Like, he ended up putting air ride on it, put Fuchs on it, slammed it, redid the whole interior, buffed the paint, but left it original, and just made a really nice bus. And he toured the show scene out there. There was like a 4-page spread on it in what is that, Volkswagens out there in the UK? Yeah, that's like one of my favorite magazines. They have all the cars that I really like. But yeah, it did Volkswagens, and then James sold it. And then a lot of people seen it, especially when James had it, because it just got really popular because he was taking it to shows. And then the next thing you know, you started seeing slammed high roofs, like left and right coming out. And yeah, that's the story of the Hobo. Nate named it the Hobo high roof because I drove it into work the first time when I got it running, work at Wagenswest. I drove it into Wagenswest, and Nate loved it as much as I did. And he's like, let's go take some pictures of this thing. Because at that point we were like kind of ramping up the website of the business, and we were like, let's go take some pictures so we could put it on the website. So we drove it down underneath 13th Street in Salem, under like Mission, right, where it says like
where the skate park is.
like there's like it says no trespassing right on all the pillars.
Yeah.
So I pulled up into there, and there's like some homeless camps in there and stuff. And Nate looks, and he's like, man, this thing just fits right in here. And I go, yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? It like belongs here. And he's like, yeah, it's like a hobo's high roof. And that's how the Hobo high roof got its name. And Nate named it. I don't normally name cars. We tend to call this one Grandpa, but I don't normally name cars. And that one got a name, and it stuck because it was.
And that's how you know it's a good name.
Yeah,
And
it was.
that's
It was.
what car name should be.
It's organic,
Yeah.
right? Exactly.
When the car tells you its name.
Exactly. So yeah, that's how the Hobo got his name, and we just call it the Hobo now.